Writing functions in Python is extremely simple. So let's write a function that heads the first n lines of a text file, since Python do not have a built-in head function like R or Bash or other languages. So to write a function, we first define the function with the reserved word def. We assign a name. In this case, we'll call header, and then we may or may not pass some arguments. In this case, we need two arguments. In file, which is a file that I already loaded here from my Google Drive. If you don't know how to load data from your Google Drive, please watch my video number 3. And then we will need another parameter that we will call nlines. And this is what we need. We will need a counter that we will initialize here at 0. And then we will start a while loop that says while counter is smaller or equal to n lines, which will be provided by the user, then grab a line from infile with the method or the function readLine that will grab one single line and strip the new line character that when we print it, it doesn't come with double spaces, and then print the line. We will need here then to increase the value of the counter by 1, and this is the whole function. In this case, if we call this function, then it produces null results because the function has to be called in order to produce results, and the arguments or values for the arguments has to be provided. And then let's call the function here. We'll call it header, and we'll need an infile, and let's say we want to see the first 11 rows. So here is the text file I am going to use. I'll just reload it, and now I will run the function, and you see that effectively it prints the n lines that we have requested, right? And then it's the title or the header of each of the columns, and then 10 additional rows. Let's say we want to change that to print 6 rows, and we execute it again, and now you see that it prints the next 6 row, right? In this case, we don't see the titles because we haven't reloaded the file. So if we want to do that, we will have to reload the file, and now the title plus 5 additional rows are here. So very simple, right, to write a function in Python. Alright guys, let's write a function that is a little bit more interesting. So this is the same file we use for exemplifying the head function, and it contains 5 columns. The first 2 columns are strings and the last 3 are numerical. But if we read this file line by line and store all the columns in a list, so Python is going to convert all of them into strings. So we will write a function that crops only the last 3 columns, convert them to floating point type, and then adds each of them right together. Then we will again define our function, and let's call it get total. We'll need a function argument that is row to pass each of the rows of the file, and we want here to add some flexibility to our function. We want the user to specify at which column it wants the our function to start summing up. Let's say column 3 in this case, either up to the end of the file or to any other interval that the user wants to add. Okay, now when it gets each of the rows, then the first thing that the function will do is will extract each of the columns of each row to be able to operate individual fields. So we will create a new variable that is called calls for columns, and that will be equal to row, and then we will split it by a tab because this is a tab separated value, and then we will here extract and slide of those 5 columns, only the numerical portion, and we will convert them to floating point on the flight. So we'll create a list that is called values, and this list will map, or the function will map to the floating point type the columns, but not all of them. Which one? From the start to the n plus 1. We add 1 here because Python is a language of exclusive range. Yeah, just Google that if you want to know more. And now we will do the actual sum here, and then we will calculate here the total, and we will use here an F string, and an F string is defined by an F and a single quotation mark, and it allows you to combine pure strings with variable and expressions. That was released in PEP 498 if you want to read the documentation. So expressions are enclosed in curly braces when you use an F string, and we will say here that we want this expression to be executed. The sum of map to float the values in the list we just created, that is called values, and we will format that to have 2 decimals. So F strings allow formatting of that, and in the vast majority of cases what we expect from a function is to return a value. So we will return this total for each of the line, right? Return, then total. And now we will call here this file. I'll just reload it just to make sure that it is in memory, and it's called infile. So the first thing we will do here is we will use a little trick. We'll say infile, then seek 0. That will rewind the file to the first line, and we are sure that we have control on where what part of the file is being processed. So as you can see here, the first line is just the titles, and there is no numerical values to sum. So we will skip that line, and we simply do that by calling the infile and then the readLine function that will read line by line an object, right? And now here we start iterating along all the rows that contain numerical values. We will do that with a while loop. While true line will be equal to infile readLine, and we will append here another function that is called strip to remove the new line character to have more control on what we print. And we will put here a checkpoint. We will say if not line, which means if we already read all the lines, then break the while loop. And now if this checkpoint is passed, we know we have a line in memory, and then we can call our function here, right? And when we can say here total will be equal to get total of what? Of line, and we want to start at column 2 and finish at column 4, but because it's exclusive range, we indicate 1 position more, right? And finally we ask our program to print the total. So let's see what happens if we execute that code. And effectively, right, our function has summed up all the values for each of the rows, right? Very powerful. And just, of course, we said we want to add flexibility. If we just want to sum up the first 2 columns, we'll just change this value here, and then the sum will be different, and you can verify that. Thank you very much. See you guys.